The future of transportation. How President Joe Biden is trying to increase the number of electric vehicles on the road. Holy Land violence. The growing calls for peace using the power of prayer. Religious freedom. How the Bishop-elect of Hong Kong is counting on faith to handle the situation with China. And stand against abortion. The Archbishop of San Francisco offers a pro-life response to Speaker Nancy Pelosi. On EWTN News Nightly for Tuesday, May 18th, 2021. Thank you so much for being with us tonight. I'm Tracy Sable. President Joe Biden heads to Dearborn, Michigan, pushing electric vehicles for the future. His $2.3 trillion infrastructure plan also calls for more charging stations. But critics fear moving away from fossil fuels could be a costly job killer. White House correspondent Owen Jensen reports. Owen?
Tracy, good evening to you. The president tonight wants to spend $174 billion for electric vehicles. That includes incentives for buyers, as well as building 500,000 charging stations by the year 2030.
President Joe Biden stops by Ford's Electric Vehicle Center in the huge Rouge complex in Dearborn, trying to spark support for his American infrastructure plan.
Look, the future of the auto industry is electric. There's no turning back.
Ford is building the Lightning. That's the all-electric version of its top-selling F-150 pickup truck. It'll be in showrooms next year.
And I wanted to be here today, the day before you unveil the next generation of America's best-selling vehicle to the entire world, to thank you. Thank you for showing how we win the competition of the 21st century.
But Americans are not quite ready just yet to bail on gas-powered vehicles.
And the American Petroleum Institute recently wrote that a rushed EV transition could lead to, quote, depleted roadway funds as EV drivers bypass the gasoline taxes that support the Federal Highway Trust Fund. Meanwhile, the COVID-19 pandemic, dramatic declines in cases, hospitalizations, and deaths.
Last fall, one of my sons contracted COVID-19. Unfortunately, he is one of the many Americans battling long-term symptoms.
President Joe Biden's senior advisor for the COVID-19 response team urging young people to get vaccinated, saying it's the most important thing they can do right now.
While cases and hospitalizations and deaths are down, COVID patients now tend to be younger.
Also today, the White House announces a presidential memorandum. The goal, expand access to legal representation and the courts. The White House says low-income people have long struggled to secure quality access to the legal system.
Now back to the infrastructure plan for a moment. To pay for it, the president is proposing hiking the corporate tax rate from 21% to 28%. Opponents fear that would be bad for business. At the White House, Owen Jensen, EWTN News Nightly.
The leading Republican in the House of Representatives says he opposes a plan to form a commission to investigate the January 6th riot at the U.S. Capitol. Representative Kevin McCarthy from California says he wants the new panel to look at groups beyond President Donald Trump's supporters, including Black Lives Matter. House Speaker Nancy Pelosi, who drafted the proposal for the committee, rejected that approach. Joining us now is Christopher Bedford, senior editor at The Federalist. Chris, welcome back. Always so good to see you. I know that you were at the Capitol on January 6th. What do you think of Representative McCarthy's request to investigate groups other than supporters of the former president?
I think this is important. It's absolutely important. I was down there on January 6th as a reporter. I was also have been here in Washington, D.C. as a reporter and sometimes as a targeted civilian at the riots and disturbances that have been tolerated in our capital city for years and years and years now. I think McCarthy was correct to push back on what the Democrats are trying to do here. What they initially proposed was not a bipartisan coalition, but an actually very partisan group of people. They've started to hedge a little bit on that. What they're trying to do is turn what was just another riot in D.C. mixed with terrible security failures into some kind of civil war or some kind of insurrection. I was down there, and it was not anything like that. There were probably more agents than there were actual militia members in that crowd. And to try and elongate this and make it basically what Democrats were trying to run on for the next 4 years, I don't think it serves anyone's interest, at least not the interest of justice.
Yeah, I want to stay on Capitol Hill now. Last week, as you know, there was a change in GOP leadership with Representative Elise Stefanik replacing Liz Cheney as the head of the GOP conference. What are your thoughts on that, and what do you think it means for the Republican Party going forward?
It was an important move. I mean, there are differences in the Republican conference all the way across it, how people's politics are. Congressmen and congresswomen and senators, they can have different ideas. But what made Liz Cheney different is that she was in leadership. Her job was to work with the entire conference, to stay on message for the GOP leadership, and to raise money. On all three of those things, she failed repeatedly and repeatedly. There are a number of Democrats in leadership who are one Democrat in leadership who's not extremely left-wing. But he doesn't go out there every day and attack Alexandria Ocasio-Cortez. He raises money. He's a conference chair. These are the kind of things that you're supposed to do. And she simply failed at that, and she had to leave. And I think that she will be held accountable by the voters of Wyoming who don't exactly agree with her politics.
I want to switch gears just a little bit here. As you know, the fighting continues in the Holy Land. And yesterday, President Biden spoke with Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu and gave his support for Israel to defend itself. And he also expressed support for a ceasefire. That said, do you think the Biden administration should be doing more here?
Well, at the end of the day, the Iron Dome and a lot of the rockets that are being fired by Israel were bought with U.S. taxpayers' dollars to help defend an ally. At the same time, he has a very bad relationship with Netanyahu. Netanyahu made no secret of the fact that he preferred Joe Biden to lose in the election. It was kind of a surprise move from him as that much of an opinion being out there. He also opposed Barack Obama when he was president. Their relationship is frosty. I don't think that Joe Biden has the ability to solve this right now, but the IDF does.
And before I let you go, I want to talk about the big news that came out of the CDC last week, sort of like an about face, if you will, changing the mask guidelines for those who've been vaccinated. What do you make of that and its timing?
Oh, it's incredibly slow, and the timing is incredibly far behind. So many people across the country had already given up on this. I find the timing rather suspicious that you would see not just the CDC roll it back, but also Washington, D.C., a number of Democratic leaders all at the same time, as well as the teachers' unions. My strong suspicion is that the polling started to come back, and these are deeply unpopular. What upsets me, though, is how Dr. Anthony Fauci has been changing what he says over and over and over again, and then admitting months later on friendly shows that of course he was lying because the American people couldn't handle the truth. It was important for him to lie, to accuse Senator Rand Paul of being a liar. This is really troubling to have this guy supposedly referencing science, but really he's just referencing his opinions.
All right, Chris, we've got to leave it right there. Thank you so much for your time today. We really appreciate it. Christopher Bedford, Senior Editor at The Federalist. Thanks again. The Archdiocese of Galveston-Houston in Texas has a new auxiliary bishop.
It has been a beautiful experience as an international priest and a member of a religious community, all Italians, which means espresso, bread, pizza, pasta in abundance.
Doesn't that sound good? Bishop-elect Italo De Loro will join Cardinal Daniel DiNardo to minister to the Archdiocese's 1.7 million Catholics. And you can learn more about the bishop-elect online at CatholicNewsAgency.com. In the Middle East, despite international calls for a ceasefire, the military confrontation continues. Hamas has launched thousands of random rockets from Gaza into Israel. Israel's Iron Dome has intercepted many, but at least 12 civilians have died. Israel is maintaining a continued response of airstrikes and artillery attacks. More than 200 Palestinians in Gaza have died, with some 1,400 wounded. Violence has erupted in the West Bank city of Ramallah. Israeli military police responded with tear gas, killing one and injuring dozens. Jerusalem's Latin Patriarch is asking all Christians to pray for peace. Russian President Vladimir Putin addresses the Israeli-Gaza conflict.
Это мероприятие проходит с некоторыми протокольными ограничениями и изменениями.
Joined by world ambassadors, Putin wants diplomacy based on UN Security Council resolutions and international law. Meanwhile, Israeli Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu says Israel's military response to Hamas and Islamic Jihad are blows they did not expect. In the Mediterranean Sea, more than 400 migrants have been rescued over the past few days as they try to cross from Libya to Italy. Many are women and unaccompanied minors. Italy reports that 13,000 migrants have arrived since the beginning of the year. Hong Kong's new bishop-elect Stephen Chow is diplomatically addressing the Catholic Church's position towards Beijing.
Religious freedom is a basic right. And I surely hope, and I will really talk to the government, encourage them, don't forget that. It's important to allow religious freedom.
Bishop-elect Chow stressed prayer for all of China and dialogue with Beijing. The church and the CCP do not have diplomatic ties. Coming up, Speaker Nancy Pelosi offered her reaction to a communion abortion support debate. Now her Archbishop in San Francisco offers the pro-life position. Archbishop Salvatore Cordileone of San Francisco is speaking out after House Speaker Nancy Pelosi claimed it is entirely up to her if she wants to receive Holy Communion despite her support of abortion. EWTN News Nightly's Capitol Hill correspondent Eric Rosales has more on that story.
It was during House Speaker Nancy Pelosi's weekly press conference that I asked the House Speaker for reaction about the U.S. Bishops' Conference considering to not let lawmakers who support pro-abortion legislation from receiving communion. The House Speaker, who is Catholic, answered my question with a question. The U.S. Archbishops and the Bishops' Conference doesn't want to allow you to receive communion. Your reaction to that?
No, I think I can use my own judgment on that, but I'm pleased with what the Vatican put out on that subject. Did you read that?
That'll be up to the individual priests?
No, it basically says don't be divisive.
It's an answer Archbishop Salvatore Cordileone of San Francisco didn't agree with.
The conscience is so misunderstood nowadays. People think it means people can decide for themselves what's right and wrong, when what it really means is knowing what the right thing is to do in a specific situation based on what is right and wrong. So I think this is a big challenge we're facing in the church today.
In a pastoral letter, His Excellency wrote, quote, "We must never lose sight of this fact. In the last 50 years in the United States alone, 66 million babies have been murdered in their mother's wombs. This is not a matter about which one can use judgment. It's a fact. He wasn't alone." Bishop Donald Hine of the Diocese of Madison, Wisconsin tweeted, quote, "Pelosi says she's pleased with Vatican letter to U.S. bishops on communion. So in other words, Nancy, we bishops should just be quiet about your radical pro-abortion stance as you facilitate the continuation of murder of millions of unborn lives?" Archbishop Cordileone was thankful the House Speaker did provide funds for churches in the latest PPP funding, but he had this final message for the House Speaker.
Let's be really pro-life, pro-woman, pro-family, and welcome every child as a gift from God and doing everything we can for that child to have a happy upbringing.
It's important to note that I did reach out to House Speaker Nancy Pelosi, but my emails were never answered. At the Capitol, Eric Rosales, EWTN News Nightly.
A crucifixion display at a Catholic church in Brooklyn, New York was vandalized last week, and now police are investigating it as a possible hate crime. The pastor at St. Athanasius discovered the vandalism last weekend. The crucifix display has been set up since 2010 in memory of his mother. An American flag outside the parish rectory was also burned. Joining us now is Monsignor David Cassato, the pastor at St. Athanasius in Brooklyn, New York. Monsignor, welcome, and thank you so much for joining us today. First off, I want to say I'm so sorry to see what happened at your parish. And I know you described it as, quote, truly an act of hatred and your saddest day at the parish since you arrived there 20 years ago. What went through your mind when you saw that vandalism?
I've got to tell you, the beginning, there was so many mixed emotions, and my heart was pulled different ways. And ultimately, when I saw the face of Jesus in the dirt, I kept on thinking of the 7 last words. And the last one that left me was, Father, forgive them, for they know not what they do. It was just a terrible, terrible act. And what happened, the parish came together that evening, and we didn't have any politicians speak. We just came together, and in front of the place where the crucifix was, we prayed the rosary together. We prayed the rosary, and we prayed the litany of the Blessed Mother, prayed for healing of our community, and we prayed for an overcoming of hatred with the gift of love. And it was a very beautiful event, and it touched everyone in the parish. I've received calls all week long since this event last Friday morning to right up until this moment, people coming together to help. We build, some people say put a bigger cross up. Some people say put a more luxurious area around the whole cross. It has been a moment of hope in the midst of such terrible hurt, pain, and even hatred.
I understand there was also another incident of vandalism at the diocese office involving a statue of the Blessed Virgin. What more can you tell us about that? And did the police have any leads on these crimes?
Well, first of all, there's been acts of vandalism, not just in the Catholic Church, in the local synagogues, the mosques. There's been all sorts of acts of vandalism. And the diocese, in front of the diocesan office building, the head of baby Jesus was broken off. These acts are crazy. The cops right now, one of the things that part of my life as a priest is being police chaplain for the city of New York. And one of the cops just brought into me moments ago a picture on surveillance of hopefully the perpetrator. So the cops are working very aggressively to try to help find the person that did this. And, you know, one of the biggest issues here in the city of New York is mental illness. And there are many people on the subways, many people throughout the streets that are really in need of mental health. And the whole need to outreach to those people, because I am sure that this person is really suffering from mental illness. No person in their right mind would ever want to do something so hurtful to a community.
Absolutely. Now, you mentioned vandalism happening in your backyard all over, and unfortunately, it seems to be happening at parishes all across the country as well. What do you think is fueling it, and what would be your message to those who are committing these crimes?
Well, I mean, first of all, there seems to be a whole sense of disruption within the country. And there's a need for people to really think about their faith and coming back to their faith, the practice of faith. I can't tell you how many people came to church this Sunday, much more. I mean, the pandemic has caused people to stay home. This Sunday, the outpouring of people at church was miraculous. The church was almost back to what it was before the pandemic. And I think an act like this has brought people back together, the need for faith, the need to return to the practice of the faith, the need to go to communion, simply that, and to be close to Jesus, because that's what we need today. The world is torn apart by all sorts of issues. You hear it, you see it in every bit of the news, and the need to return to the basic practice of faith. I think that's critical.
Oh, Monsignor, you're so right. And thank you so much for your time today. And we're praying for all of you in New York. Thank you again.
God bless you. And thank you for the great work of EWTN. I'm a big fan of EWTN. Thank you.
Up next, a group designed to send support. Meet the new national director of the Pontifical Mission Society. And enduring faith. How a new documentary celebrates Native American Catholics. The Pontifical Mission Societies named a new national director of the United States. Father Kieran Harrington joins the mission after 17 years working with the Diocese of Brooklyn, New York. The Pontifical Mission Societies supports dioceses in poor territories under the direction of the Holy See. Father Kieran Harrington joins us now from Rome. Father, welcome. Great to have you on. Tell us about the Pontifical Mission Society, the work that it does, and also specifically your duties as National Director.
Right. So the Pontifical Mission Society is better known in the United States by some as the propagation of the faith. That's really one branch of the work of the Pontifical Mission Society. There's the Holy Childhood Association. This is a separate branch that works specifically for building schools for children and programs for children, evangelization programs for children. And then there is the Society of St. Peter, which is providing for the education of seminarians and training of religious. And then there is the Missionary Union. This is the organization which is for also the formation of those who are involved in the work of animating the mission. So between the propagation of the faith, which is building churches and seminaries and other institutions to support the life of the church in the mission countries, you have these various branches.
And will you be working with the churches in the U.S.? And speaking of that, how do you think the church in the U.S. is doing overall, especially during the pandemic?
Well, my experience has been that the pandemic has been very terrible suffering, but despite the terrible suffering, it is also an opportunity for an experience of coming closer to Christ. And that is my own experience as a parish priest, is that while so many people in my parish had suffered, they also came very close to Christ. That's what I think has been the experience in the United States as well.
And in your first year as National Director, what are you hoping to achieve?
I think that the goals that I have are, one, to animate the missions, animate a sense of the missions throughout the United States. That, October, we think about World Mission Sunday, and it's not simply about taking a collection. It's really about inspiring a sense of union with the church in mission territories, that we recognize that when we are helpful, when we are assisting the missions by our prayers, our prayerful support of the missions, and also our charitable work towards the missions, we're united with them and our own faith is deepened. We have a sense of being one church, one body in Christ.
And Father, before I let you go, we have probably about a minute or so left. Wondering if you have any messages for our viewers this evening.
The most important thing that we can do for the people in the missions is to pray for them, because we know that as we pray for them, they are praying for us. And the second thing that we want to do is we want to make sure that we support those in the missions. We want to support them not simply by our prayers, but also by our charitable activity, by the use of our resources and our time. And so what I would ask those who are viewers is to, one, make sure that you're praying for those in the missions, praying for their conversion, praying so that they can come to know Christ and enter into a deeper relationship with Christ, and at the same time help them to come to know Christ by supporting the works of the church in the mission territories.
Well, Father, thank you so much for joining us today. We appreciate it, and thank you for all that you do. Father Kieran Harrington, National Director of the Pontifical Mission Societies of the United States. Thank you again.
Thank you, Tracy.
And finally tonight, Enduring Faith is a new documentary about the heritage and witness of Native American Catholics.
Christ reveals himself through the beauty of each and every one of our cultures. We are vibrant, we are alive, we are still here.
The film celebrates Native American Catholics and touches upon their sufferings. It is produced by the Knights of Columbus, which also supports News Nightly. And you can find a link to the video trailer and broadcast schedule by going to CatholicNewsAgency.com. We thank you for watching tonight. For the entire EWTN News Nightly team, I'm Tracy Sable. Good night and God bless.